All right, let's talk about Buccaneers quarterback number one. It was announced prior to the game, actually last week, that Mayfield would be the starting quarterback. So, bit of an interesting move to do it before the preseason game starts, because what if he had like a horrible preseason game or something? But they didn't have to worry about that because Mayfield looked as good as he looked in week one, in my opinion, in this. I think he's shown that he should be the starter at this point. Definitely looked very good. But instead of me telling you that, why don't we get into the film? Let's talk about what he did in admittedly a small sample size. Not a ton of plays to discuss, but in this small sample size, it was a continuation of the first preseason game of just a good performance. Let's start off with this play. This is an interesting play as it again kind of goes to something I brought up in my first preseason video I made about Baker Mayfield, the only other time he played a game, which is it feels like we're seeing a more cautious Mayfield. It feels like we're seeing a guy who isn't going to just push the ball down the field willy-nilly, which to me seems like a clear intentional decision by either him or by the coaching staff, or my guess would be both. The way this play concept works is actually pretty simple. It's a third down and 4, so I have to get to the 35-yard line, and the Ravens are in zone coverage. So with a lot of routes running underneath, some of these could get into a gap in coverage, and hopefully you can just throw one 5 yards down the field, move the chains, and get another set of downs. Okay, simple enough. However, when Mayfield takes the snap, there isn't a lot going on right here. I mean, again, he could try and force it here through a tight window. Maybe that's not even a bad idea. That's an option he could make, and to be honest, it feels like it's an option that old Baker Mayfield doesn't even hesitate on making. He just fires it through one of those tight windows, and it works out or it doesn't. However, you notice that I circled the 3 eligible receivers who are down the field in black, the ones that we can see on the screen. There's another one further off screen. I've also circled the halfback in yellow, as that is another option. Throw it there and hope your halfback can, make a move and get the first down that way. That ends up being exactly what Mayfield does, and does it work out here? No, it doesn't. But again, we can't be results-oriented in our thinking right here because, we don't know what would have happened if he threw the ball down the field. The reality is we should ask, is this the correct decision for Mayfield or is it the incorrect decision for Mayfield? And at the end of the day, Mayfield being a bit more cautious probably isn't the worst thing in the world. I do think that for someone like Mayfield, he's known for being too aggressive. So the fact that he's being a little bit more cautious here in the preseason, again, is that probably the more fit with what Tampa Bay wants to do, which is run the ball, protect the football, play good defense? It seems like it's what they want him to be able to do. And again, there is an idea, there is an identity to that team. Also, this play I thought was very fascinating. So it's going to be a zone coverage play once again, and you have a few routes that could get open kind of underneath. There's one concept towards the bottom of the screen where you have a tight end who's going to run further deep, and then Godwin who runs kind of underneath. And traditionally, the way it works is that only one of those guys can get open. Usually, you have a linebacker who kind of chooses to either cover underneath or cover further deep, and for Mayfield, you just hit the other guy. Watch how when Mayfield takes the snap, really, it's going to be Godwin who's open right here. And so for Mayfield, all right, simple enough. He sees it. He wants to make this throw. Why isn't he making the throw? Well, let's talk about one of the negatives that was talked about with Mayfield when he was drafted, first overall. Yes, he was drafted first overall, but it's worth mentioning that there were some criticisms about that selection. And, he was not a perfect prospect. He wasn't like a Trevor Lawrence hyped up level of prospect. And while it seemed like a lot of the criticisms were more off-the-field stuff, which I don't know if they've really come to be any reason why Mayfield hasn't fully succeeded in the NFL, but, the on-the-field aspect, one of it was not the tallest guy, kind of a smaller guy, and you look at the defensive lineman who's right in front of Mayfield, kind of in between Mayfield and Godwin, not really a clear window right there, and it's going to be tough for him to get the throw over. But Mayfield kind of steps around, finds a running lane, and is still able to hit Godwin, who does great work after the catch and picks up the first down. So, these are the kind of things where, you could look at this in 2 different directions, I think. The obvious one is, well, who cares if he's not that tall? He got the ball there anyway. He figured out a way to make it work. So what does it matter if he had to do a little bit of extra work? He still found a way to make it happen. I think the obvious counter to that, though, would be to say, yes, he did eventually get over there, but in a regular season game, the windows will be tighter, and maybe by the time you move over, now that window that was there is no longer there, and you can't make the throw. I think the reality is everyone understands that if you're a smaller player, it is going to be more difficult. That's part of, being a quarterback is, having a little bit of height certainly helps you. But at the same time, to me, I still think this is a positive play, because if you can consistently make stuff like this happen, well, again, that's how Drew Brees was successful. That's how Russell Wilson was and maybe still is successful, depending on how he does this year, right? You can find ways to navigate the pocket and, make it happen. And Mayfield doing a good job of doing that here. So I wouldn't consider it a negative unless he's not being able to make the plays work. Also, something like this. I mean, Mayfield really done a great job in the red zone, which, Tampa Bay had some weird red zone issues last year, which obviously no one's going to blame Brady for that. But, in key plays, they kind of had some struggles, and I think a big part of that was the, coaching, also the offensive line, injuries didn't help, all of that stuff. But another aspect is, hey, the quarterback still doesn't have to make a play, though, and, a lot of times red zone plays are what a football game comes down to. Can you turn 3 points into 7 points? And so for Mayfield, the fact that he's hitting on some end zone throws in the preseason is exciting. This play, it's going to be a zone coverage play. It's going to try to throw the ball to Chris Godwin. That's the way this play works. Hit Godwin kind of in the back of the end zone, depending, if a gap in coverage does open up there. While on paper, it might look like he's just running directly into where the safety is. How could he get open? There is going to be a tight end who's going to kind of try to get the safety out of position a little bit, as he's going to get into that zone a little, or before Godwin does. And so obviously in a vacuum, you'd rather cover Godwin than a tight end. But at the same time, you cover the guy who's in your zone first and foremost. So that's why it could work. Watch how Mayfield's going to take the snap right here. He's going to eventually look over the middle of the field. He fires over the middle of the field, and there's a window. I mean, again, I'm not trying to say that this is a mailbox type throw. There is a window. But you know what? One of the things that gets you a little bit excited if you're a Tampa Bay fan is there have been windows, and Mayfield's had a very high success rate at getting the ball through those windows. Watch as you see he hits Chris Godwin, and they are able to get a touchdown on that play. So, as a whole, I would say it is good stuff there from Baker Mayfield. Now, listen, it's undeniable in my opinion. Mayfield, he's a guy who's had good preseasons in the past. So, I wouldn't necessarily sit here and say he's definitely going to succeed at the, in the regular season, because, like I said, he's had good preseasons followed up by bad seasons. I remember he lit the world on fire in a small sample size in a preseason for Cleveland, in the year that Freddie Kitchens was the head coach. There was so much hype, they just added Odell, and things obviously immediately went off the rails. So you can't get too hyped over preseason, but at the same time, if you're a fan of football, kind of what the preseason is for, is getting way too hyped, even though you probably shouldn't, right? That's kind of the excitement of it. But in all seriousness, he's looked very good out there. He's commanded the offense well. He's hit the throws that he's had to hit. So he's passed every test that he's taken so far. He just hasn't had to take the hard test. And, hopefully when he does have to take those, he will succeed as well. But I don't know. If you were maybe a 3 out of 10 on the optimism scale for Mayfield, this is probably enough to bump you up to a 4, in my opinion. But that's just kind of how I view it. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. What were your thoughts on Baker Mayfield here this preseason? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.